So Dr. King spent his 39th birthday, ultimately his last working. A then 26-year-old Jesse Jackson remembers King coming to the basement of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. King walked in that day around 9 a.m. after breakfast with his family, wearing blue jeans and a windbreaker. He convened the Southern Christian Leadership Conference's staff meeting that included a coalition of Blacks from the Deep South, whites from Appalachia, Jewish allies from New York, Latino farm worker organizers to plan what would be his last campaign, the Poor People's March on our nation's capital. Together, they demanded jobs, income equality, and an end to militarism, which was all driven by a deep, heartfelt morality to include everyone and leave no one behind. Jackson recalls that King was teased that he forgot to celebrate his own birthday. A cake was brought in and King quickly blew out the candles. They ate it in record time, and within moments, the plates were cleared and they were back to planning the march. In just a few short months, King was assassinated, and the Poor People's Campaign went on without him. And it still goes on today. The Poor People's Campaign goes on and on, beyond the dream. Inspired by the Black Power movement, King's focus changed over time. It went from an anti-segregation activism to the hopes of a national economic revolution. He knew Blacks would continue to suffer if they lacked economic equality. About a month before King was assassinated, he said in a speech in Memphis, "It is criminal to have people working on a full-time basis and a full-time job getting part-time income." King clearly opposed class oppression, and his support of a sanitation union in Memphis became a sort of testing ground for this new prophetic ministry he was entering, this coalition of the disadvantaged, his redream. Before that, King had little success confronting the economic disparity found in the ghettos of Chicago. The housing marches that he led were violently opposed by poor and working class whites. It was called Operation Breadbasket. The goal was to create more unions for urban Blacks, develop more Black businesses, and along with open housing. King knew that this was too local and thought about it on a national level. And what if poor whites were brought in as partners? The motivation behind this all was a deep felt sense of morality. It is wrong to blame the poor for being poor. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scriptures have plenty to say that we should side with the poor against the interests of the rich. King's radical idea was to redistribute our nation's wealth in a fair and equitable way, have a guaranteed annual income, and a better unemployment system. And then the unrest of the summer of 1967 happened. Violence broke out in cities across the US, and this made him clarify his stance even further. He knew people needed a nonviolent outlet for their anger. He knew the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voter Rights Act of 65 didn't go far enough, largely surface changes that was only affected the middle class. In the summer of 67 also helped clarify the vision of the Poor People's Campaign. They were to march to Washington and demand economic justice for everyone. He formed a multiracial coalition, giving the suffering a front and center voice. His plan included training 3,000 people in nonviolence. They would be the first to take up residence in our nation's capital, a shanty town called Resurrection City. King envisioned a broad moral appeal to churches, to labor, to liberals, to intellectuals, to students, and of course, to the poor. He wanted to oppose the elite and lift up the underclass. King strove to get profit out of the equation and realign ourselves with the vision of a democratic socialism, like other rich countries in the world were doing. After World War II, European countries largely chose to work less, take more vacation, have greater social safety nets, and more progressive taxing. The US decided to work more, tax the rich less, and concentrate more wealth in fewer people. Capital, that is money and wealth, should be democratized. The whole country should be wholly democratic, including the economy. After all, poverty is not a racial issue, though it is well documented that the average white household has more wealth than the average black household. And poor people are not lazy. Most poor people are not actually on welfare. Most poor people work hard, very hard, sometimes 2 to 3 jobs. No one chooses to be poor. Poverty has to do with the interconnectedness that is called human community. From the light of Martin Luther King Jr. burns a beacon bright and clear. And from that youthful vision of what could be arises a new prophetic voice demanding a deeper justice. From the shores of the living comes the Reverend William Barber II, who took up this marathon race of justice and sings a song both brave and free. In 2013, he started the Moral Monday movement that included protests and rallies at the North Carolina Capitol aimed at combating voter suppression, and ultimately he won. In 2017, he stepped down as president of the North Carolina NAACP and began to co-lead with the Reverend Theo Harris a new Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival. He knew this had to be a long-term approach and not just one march. The long-term approach includes demands for affordable education, immigrant rights, and fair tax policy. He wants to revive the heart of our democracy. The issues of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and the war economy are interlocked. And the poor and others affected by these policies need to be brought into the conversation. Reverend Barber has been and is calling for a revolution of the heart, a revolution of the soul of a nation. We need to look at public policy through our deepest religious and spiritual lenses, and take a look at what our Constitution actually says. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. He calls it a moral fusion organizing. And I can't think of a better organization that represents our religious and spiritual values and actually has a plan to put them into action. I think there's a great potential here because let's face it, our county, St. Lawrence, is poor. The North Country is poor. Even people like me, privileged in the professional managerial class, have more in common with the poor than the rich. In fact, in the grand scheme of this country, everyone on this Zoom session is poor. The Poor People's Campaign demands easier access to voting, raising the minimum wage, an end to mass incarceration, a just immigration system, and that indigenous nations will be treated with respect, that there's decent housing for everyone, bans on assault-style rifles, and to stop the war on the poor so that we can together address ecological devastation and systemic racism. It is a radical agenda. It is a radical agenda that I think Martin Luther King Jr. would be proud of. It is a radical agenda that Unitarian Universalists across our country long for. Next Sunday, as a congregation, we will vote to endorse this platform and become a faith partner with the Poor People's Campaign. Numerous other UU congregations and the Unitarian Universalist Association are already faith partners. Please choose to endorse and become a faith partner. For us, for our local congregation, it means a lot more of the same. Teresa Veramendi, our social justice coordinator, and others in the congregation will remain leaders in the North Country chapter. I will keep attending the clergy calls, and when it is safe to meet in person, we can again use our building as a meeting place. We might like to take up a shared offering for their cause, and I hope our congregation gets more involved. Because the journey of justice is a long one. It needs organizers, coalitions, and connections to build a movement. Justice needs us. If there's one thing I learned over the past 2 weeks, it's how much power corporations have. Now, they don't necessarily have authority. Elected leaders have the authority. But corporations rule us more than we know. They're the ones that are cutting off money to members of Congress who voted against certifying the electors. Corporations are the ones that are muting Trump. Corporations are not evil. They are not. But the fourth branch of government can't be corporate America. We, the people of faith, have to have the bigger moral heart, the louder moral voice in our nation. And we can't sit by and let the conservative agenda be pushed on us as if it is some moral right thing to do. Justice is a long-running race, a long relay. You run your circle and you pass the baton. Martin Luther King Jr. and others have run their race. And now it is our turn to listen to the broken hearts of poverty that are all around us. Justice spirals into the unity of years. Though the past few days of our nation have been stormy and dark, and the burdens of all of it may weigh us down, together, in a coalition, in solidarity with our fellow siblings, we can build and redream our nation, our state, redream our community. I know we can do this. I know we can go on. I know that a redream lives on in each and every one of us. It is a we thing. Justice is a we thing. So let's celebrate King's birthday, not with cake and song, but with good old-fashioned organizing for justice. This week, let's celebrate the election of a new president and then get back to the work to complete the unfinished business of establishing justice, promoting the general welfare, and securing the blessings of love now and into the future. Amen and blessed be.